Germany lost the First World War in November 1918, but what about the other Central Powers? In this video, we're going to talk about the end of the First World War for Austro-Hungary. Stay tuned. Hey, good to have you back on the channel. My name is Stefan. I'm a history teacher. I'm Dutch and I'm hustling history for you. If you liked it, please consider subscribing and hit that notification bell. In September 1918, the Allies defeated the Bulgarians on the Macedonian front. With the loss of Bulgaria, the Ottomans were cut off from Europe. The Ottoman Empire signed an armistice in October 1918 that left only Germany and Austro-Hungary in the war. So how did it end for Austria-Hungary? The beginning of the end for the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Habsburg Empire, started happening mid-June 1918 during the Second Battle of the Piave River. On June 15th, the Austrians launched an offensive on the Piave front. Its preliminary artillery bombardment was short of shells, and the Germans weren't able to provide phosphine gas shells the Austrians had asked for. Furthermore, on the Asiago sector, Italian intelligence knew about the upcoming attack and prevented it with artillery strikes of their own. British and French troops who were also stationed there were pushed back. With a successful counterattack, however, they captured 1,500 Austro-Hungarians. In the Monte Grappa sector, the advance was stopped after 3 kilometers. An Italian attack drove them back. When crossing the Piave River on pontoon bridges, Allied aircraft wreaked havoc on the crossing Austrians. Austrian planes were shot down by Italian planes, and as the Allies began to advance, the Austrians began to withdraw north of the Piave River. By June 24, the lost Austro-Hungarian troops had crossed the Piave. Their attack had failed. The Second Battle of the Piave marked the beginning of the end for the Habsburg Army. It left over 142,000 men dead or wounded, while 25,000 of their soldiers were taken captive by the Allies. The dual monarchy could no longer compensate for such losses with new recruits. Even the dismissal in mid-July 1918 of the long-serving Chief of General Staff, Conrad von Hotzendorf, made no difference at this point. Mid-September 1918, Emperor Franz Joseph of the Habsburg Empire, he sued for peace, but the British and French leaders, they were afraid that this was an attempt to divide them, since the US had already clearly stated its peace conditions. The Italian leaders wanted to exploit their advantage in battle in order to strengthen its position at the negotiation table. On October 24th, the Italian army launched 2 attacks, one at Monte Grappa and one at Vittorio Veneto. British and Italian troops managed to cross the Piave River. The crossing was quick and unexpected for the Habsburg army, as bridgeheads were established and POWs were taken. Within 5 days, the Austro-Hungarians were on the run, and around 300,000 of them, including 24 generals, were taken prisoner. Vittorio Veneto was taken on October 30th. On November 1st, the Hungarian government decided to pull back its Hungarian forces from the Habsburg army. So Hungarian soldiers were therefore allowed to go home. Well, obviously this didn't do much good for the morale of the remaining troops. Germans, Austrians, Czechs, Southern Slavs in the Habsburg army, they refused to fight. The Allies were fighting against a disintegrating army. Emperor Karl telegraphed Wilhelm II, the Emperor of Germany, that he was suing for peace. Now, initially the Austrian-Hungarians didn't get any peace because the Italians were still advancing. They wanted to grab as much territory as they could. And as the Habsburg army retreated, the Allies attacked the rear guards and retreating columns from the air. The Asiago plateau was in Italian hands by November 2nd. The Tyrolean regiments were the last units of the Habsburg army that were still fighting. Italian commander Badoglio handed over Italy's terms for an armistice. The Austro-Hungarians must stop fighting at once. The Imperial Army must be reduced to 20 divisions and surrender half of its artillery. All of the occupied territories corresponding to the Treaty of London must be evacuated within a period to be decided by the Allies. All German troops must leave the empire within 15 days. All Allied prisoners of war must be liberated at once, and the Allies must have free use of all imperial transport networks. The terms were non-negotiable, and the Austrians had until midnight on November 3rd to accept. In Vienna, Emperor Karl debated with the Prime Minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the Chief of Staff on what to do. If they agreed with Italy's terms, this could mean that Germany could be attacked from the south. Yet the appeal of saving hundreds and thousands of lives was stronger, and thus they agreed to sign. It would come in effect on November 4th, 1500 hours. Meanwhile, the Czech National Council in Prague declared an independent Czechoslovakia on October 28th. The next day in Agram, now Zagreb, the Croatian parliament declared Croatia and Dalmatia part of a sovereign state of Slovenes, Croats and Serbs. The Austrian port city of Fiume declared its own independence and demanded union with Italy. In Budapest, Count Karoli, with Emperor Karl's agreement, severed the ties between Hungary and Austria that were together since 1867, starting armistice negotiations with the French forces that had fought their way up to Serbia. In Vienna, workers demonstrated against the monarchy itself. Soldiers returned and demanded for a republic. Thousands of ex-soldiers coming back to the capital of Vienna resulted into the fact that revolution was in the air. As an Austrian newspaper wrote, "Burning fever has befallen many of its inhabitants, raging through their bodies, impairing their senses, their limbs refusing to obey, their heads are full of the painful mass which suggests wild nightmares and agonizing visions. And just like the individual citizen, the whole huge sick body of the town is smitten by a fever attack, sapping the vigor that enabled it to carry its heavy burden for so long." Despite all the odds, the Austrian Revolution, so to say, happened fairly peaceful, just as it had done in Germany at the time. Emperor Karl abdicated on November 11th, which was also the day that the armistice between Germany and the Allied powers came into effect. The Provisional National Assembly chose Social Democrat Karl Renner as Chancellor. Elections were held in February 1919, where a grand coalition government of two main democratic parties, the Social Democratic Party and the Conservative Christian Social Party, saw the light of day. Many claim that the Austro-Hungarian Empire dissolved because of nationalism, but this isn't fully correct. The main reason were material deprivations on large sections of the population, most notably in the Austrian cities in the latter years of the war. By late 1917, large parts of the urban population were hungry, and this increased the potential for civil unrest. Strikes in Austria initially took the form of protests against the poor food distribution and the high prices. We saw it in Russia, we saw it in Germany, and Austria-Hungary was no exception. An official peace treaty with Austria was signed in 1919, the Treaty of Saint-Germain, and with Hungary in 1920, the Treaty of Trianon. But that is something for another video. Don't forget to subscribe. If you want to know more about the end of World War I for Germany, you can click right here. Thank you so much for watching. Give this video a like, and I see you later.